the gold that should have stayed buried. The Andes did not rise. They watched. That was Elena Ruiz's first mistake, believing these mountains were only stone. She had flown over deserts that looked dead but whispered at night. She had photographed ruins swallowed by moss, temples chewed open by root and rain, cities that the earth had politely pretended never existed. But the Andes were different. They didn't whisper. They waited. Elena felt it the second the jeep crossed the cracked road that bent toward the Cordillera Blanca, where the sky tasted too close and the clouds pressed down like something breathing onto her skin. There was a pressure here, not the thin, dizzying altitude tourists complained about, but a silence so thick it felt intentional, like a cathedral built by something that didn't want to be named. She rubbed her palms against her jeans as the vehicle climbed through narrow paths carved directly into ancient rock, her camera bag resting heavy at her side like a second heart. Javier had been driving for hours without turning the radio on. He never did. His hands stayed steady on the wheel, fingers pale and tight, knuckles dusted with powder from the road. He drove like a man fleeing something he refused to look at in the mirror. Elena felt the same. In the back seat, Mateo slept uneasily, head leaning against the window, breath shallow and irregular. He'd started sleep-talking when they crossed the valley. Not in Spanish, not in English, and not in any language Elena had ever heard. Once, he had whispered, "The gold is listening." Javier hadn't reacted, which scared her more than if he had. They passed the last village just before noon. It barely deserved the name. A handful of adobe huts clung to the slope, like children afraid to let go. Dirty laundry flapped in the wind like pale surrender flags. An old woman sat alone outside a door too small for her to exit easily, eyes blank white like stones washed smooth by rain. Elena rolled down her window. The air tasted wrong. Dry, sharp, as though the wind itself had been chewing on bones. The woman turned her head slowly, not toward the jeep, toward Elena. Their eyes met. The woman smiled, but her mouth didn't move. When Elena gasped, the jeep lurched forward again. They were past her. "I didn't like that," Elena whispered. Javier didn't respond, only pressed the accelerator harder. That was when Mateo spoke again from the back. "She knows where we're going." Elena twisted around. Mateo's eyes were still shut. His voice wasn't sleep-raised. It was steady, clear, too clear. "Elena," Javier warned quietly, "don't wake him." But she already had. Mateo blinked awake, confused. "Why are you both staring at me like that?" Elena swallowed. "You were talking again." Mateo frowned. "About what?" Before she could answer, Javier said, "Nothing important." And Elena hated him for it. They reached the abandoned mining station just before dusk. It sat half-buried in dust and time. Wooden structures warped and blackened by wind and abandonment, metal roofs sagging like tired shoulders. Crates stamped with foreign company names lay cracked and empty like old coffins. This place once dressed itself as civilization. Now it looked like something that had tried and failed. Mateo stepped out of the jeep and inhaled sharply. "Do you smell that?" Elena did. At first she thought it was rust or moisture. Then her stomach twisted. It smelled like blood left too long in heat. Not fresh enough to run. Not old enough to forget. "This place is wrong," she muttered. Mateo ran a hand through his hair nervously. "Yeah, that's kind of our brand though, isn't it?" Javier slammed the door and grabbed his pack. "Get inside before the wind rises." "What happens when it does?" Elena asked. Javier paused, then shrugged. "Bad dreams walk easier in moving air." Mateo laughed uneasily. "That's a weird sentence." Javier didn't smile. Inside the old station, dust swam through narrow beams of sunset like dying embers. Ancient equipment rested where men had dropped it decades ago, as if they had simply stopped mid-work and vanished. A prayer carved into the far wall caught Elena's eye. Not Spanish, not Latin, older, etched in tight, desperate lines so deep it must have taken days to scrape through heavy stone. She leaned in close. The symbol at the center was not a cross, was not a sun. It was a mouth, open, watching, waiting. Mateo sniffed the air. "You hear that?" he asked. Elena closed her eyes. Yes, a low sound, not mechanical, not natural, a hum, as if something far underground were dreaming. Underscore, 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 underscore. That night, none of them slept well. Elena's dreams were filled with hands coming out of walls. Javier dreamed of his father. Mateo dreamed of gold falling from his mouth until he couldn't breathe. They didn't talk about it. They just sat by the fire in silence, watching shadows curl against the stone like living things. At midnight, the ground trembled. Softly, not enough to feel, but enough to wake something inside Elena's chest. She sat up, heart racing. Then she heard it. Footsteps. Outside the station. Slow. Dragging. Not human. She reached for her flashlight. Javier was already standing, gun in hand. Mateo woke coughing. Do you hear? The door creaked inward. A shape stood in the doorway. Not a man. Not a ghost. Something between. Its eyes glowed not red, but gold. Elena froze. The figure reached forward and spoke. In her voice. Elena. And the mountains listened. The thing in the doorway did not enter. It waited. And somehow that was worse. Elena's fingers locked around the flashlight until her knuckles burned, but she did not turn it on. Some animal instinct deep inside her bones whispered, "Don't let it see you clearly." When she lifted her eyes again, the thing had not moved. It did not breathe. It did not blink. It simply existed, like a memory that refused to fade. Now, Javier whispered, steady voice trembling behind the lie. We move. Slowly. Mateo tried to stand, but nearly fell back onto his sleeping bag. His legs shook violently, as if they no longer agreed with the idea of being attached to him. Elena, he whispered hoarsely. It doesn't look finished. Like it's half poured. She saw it then. The edges of its body blurred unnaturally, as if light could not settle on it. Its face reminded her of melted metal, human features slouched and sagging like something that had once been a person and then remembered wrong. Then it spoke again. Elena. But this time, it wasn't her voice. It was her mother's. And Elena felt her mind splinter. Her mother had been dead for 8 years. Cancer. Lungs first. Then everywhere else. She had held her hand when the machines went quiet. She remembered the hollow space where warmth had gone, and the obscene calm of the room afterward. This thing in the door borrowed that voice like currency, and spent it freely. Elena Carino. I'm so cold. She gagged. Javier moved in front of her. Gun raised. This is not her, he said, and fired. The explosion tore through the station like thunder breaking bone. The bullet struck the figure square in the chest, and passed through. No blood. No movement. The thing did not react. It simply tilted its head, not in pain, in curiosity, like a child watching an insect die under glass. Mateo screamed, and just like that, the shape began to fade, not disappear, sink, as if the doorway were swallowing it. Gold eyes lingered last, burning, imprinting. Then the door stood empty. Only darkness beyond. Only silence inside. The gun clattered from Javier's hands. Elena collapsed to her knees. Mateo threw up onto the dirt floor, and none of them moved for a very long time. When Elena finally looked up again, dawn was bleeding through the sky like a wound learning how to open. Light entered the station painfully slow, as if the world itself were hesitant to look inside. The door still stood open, but nothing waited there now. I'm not crazy, Mateo muttered from the floor, wiping his mouth with trembling fingers. Tell me I'm not. Javier leaned against the wall, his face colorless. No. Elena forced herself to stand. Her legs did not argue. They obeyed. And that scared her more than anything. Because fear should make you weak. Not sharp. You said, she paused, throat raw. You've seen things before. Javier's jaw tightened. Everyone sees something in war. That wasn't war, she said. That was something else. Mateo pushed himself upright. With respect, Captain Trauma, he muttered, forcing a shake of a smile. That wasn't just something else. That was... Don't name it, Javier snapped. They froze. He exhaled slowly. Not yet. Why? Elena asked. Because once you give something a name, he said quietly, it learns how to answer. They packed quickly. Too quickly. Their hands moved like they were late to something terrible. Mateo tried to crack jokes. Failed. Elena refused to look back at the door. Javier led the way uphill without explanation. Toward the old mine tunnels. Toward gold. Toward whatever had spoken her name. The mine mouth sat carved into the mountain like a wound in bone. Dark. Wet. Whispering. Elena swore she could hear water deep inside. Not dripping. Running. You hear that? She asked. Mateo squinted. No. Javier nodded. Yes. They stood still. Then, the sound shifted. Not water. Breathing. Long. Deep. Patient. Mateo laughed under his breath. Nah, that's not creepy. No one joined him. They entered anyway. Because treasure hunters always do. The tunnel swallowed them greedily. Their flashlights died almost immediately. One by one. No flicker. No warning. Just darkness. Black so thick it had weight. Okay, Mateo whispered, forcing humor into existence with sheer will. That's new. Javier clicked his tongue. Matches. Elena fumbled inside her pack. Found one. Struck it. The flame leapt painfully alive. But what it revealed made her breath die instead. The walls were carved. Not by tools. By hands. Thousands of them. Finger marks bored into the rock like a language written in suffering. Hundreds of ancient Incan faces stared out from the stonework. Not revered. Not noble. Screaming. Twisted. Frozen at the moment of horror. Mateo whispered. They weren't mining. Elena nodded slowly. They were escaping. Suddenly, the tunnel behind them collapsed. Not loudly. Not violently. Smoothly. Like a jaw shutting. They turned. But it was already gone. Stone. Solid. Sealed. Mateo backed away. No. No, 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 no. That wasn't in the brochure. Javier closed his eyes. This was not an accident. This was an answer. They walked for hours. Time broke underground. The mine opened into a cathedral-sized cavern. Gold glittered from every surface. In veins. In rivers. In walls. Ceilings. A city of dead light. Mateo laughed weakly. Holy shit. Elena didn't feel awe. She felt watched. And somewhere very deep inside her bones. Something felt wronged. A presence swam inside the gold. Alive. Listening. Learning. Javier dropped to his knees. Not in worship, but exhaustion. This place, he breathed. It's not dying. Elena whispered without meaning to. It's waiting. And then, something moved inside the gold. Not a reflection. Not light. A ripple. Like skin turning in sleep. Mateo whispered. It knows me. The gold began to hum. The tunnels listened. The mountains leaned closer. And far, far above, the storm began to build. Not rain. Not yet. But something that walked inside clouds. Something that remembered names. The gold did not glow. It breathed. Not like lungs. Like a wound. A wet, hungry shimmer crawled across every vein in the cavern, pulsing in rhythm with something Elena felt rather than heard. The sound was not outside them. It was inside her chest, crawling through bone and memory like roots in ruined soil. Mateo dropped his pack slowly. He couldn't explain why. His body had decided before his mind could protest. That's not normal gold, he whispered. Javier stood frozen, one knee bent, as if the earth itself had half caught him mid-fall. Elena reached out, palm hovering inches from a vein the thickness of her leg. It was warm, not from temperature, from life, and it recognized her. A shudder rippled through her, and suddenly, the mountain spoke, not in language, in memory. She saw fire, not flame, sunset burning into flesh. Screams pressed into the back of her eyes. 1,000 people running into the mountain and never coming back out. Children turned into echoes. Priests with hands soaked in light that wasn't holy. Gold worshipped until it learned to hate being loved. And beneath it all, something old, something not born. Something awakened when the first blade cut into this mountain's skin and drank not blood, but promise. Elena collapsed. Javier caught her before the floor could. Her lips moved, not her voice. They buried us alive. Mateo backed away. Elena. Her eyes rolled open. Gold flooded them. When she spoke again, the language was wrong. Too old. Too hollow. The sound bent the air. Javier shouted her name. Shook her. Hard. And then, she exhaled. Color returned. Eyes brown once more. Alive. Human. She gagged and pressed against the cavern wall. I saw them. Javier held her upright. Who? All of them. Mateo swallowed. All who? The mountain, she whispered. Before it was a mine. They did not rest. None of them could. Sleep whispered nearby, but they knew better. This place would dream back. Instead, Javier moved deeper, towards something he had prayed never existed. And Elena followed. Not because she wanted answers, because they were coming whether she asked or not. They reached a chamber within the chamber. Carved stone. Impossible shape. A hall too precise for ancient hands. And in the center, an altar, not carved, grown, gold twisted like muscle across a throne of bones. And behind it, an opening, not tunnel, not cave, a wound in the earth shaped like a door. Mateo whispered, "Nope." Javier dropped his pack. "I hope this wasn't it." Elena turned sharply. "You've seen this before." Javier didn't answer, which was also an answer. Finally, he spoke. "My unit was sent here years ago." Mateo frowned. "For what? Smugglers?" Javier's laugh had no humor left. "No. For the people who came out wrong." Elena stared at him. "Out of where?" Javier gestured. "The door. The mountain's mouth." That. He told them everything. About a team that went in and returned hollow. About a village found kneeling in gold dust, mouth smiling, eyes gone. About a man who tried to burn the mine and vanished screaming into the rock. "They were alive," Javier whispered. "But not theirs anymore." Mateo lowered himself onto the stone. "So you brought us here?" "No," Javier said. "I ran." Elena's eyes burned. "And now?" He met her gaze. "Now the mountain remembered my face." Something moved behind the gold altar. A shifting, a hissing. Not snake, not breath. Stone rearranging itself around a living thing. Elena stood. "I don't think the treasure is the gold." Mateo nodded slowly. "I think the gold is the bait." A sound emerged. Not from the altar. From all around them. Low, deep, vibrating through teeth and temples. The voice did not speak. It knew. And within that knowing, names unfolded. Not just Elena's. Mateo's mother. Javier's brother. Dead men calling home. Not screaming. Pleading. The mountain was full of voices. Full of mouths without bodies. Mateo dropped to his knees. "I hear her." Elena grabbed him. "No, you don't." But she did too. Her mother. Her voice. Her arms. Gone. Yet now. Close. So close. Javier screamed. And fired into the gold altar. The bullet did nothing. The cavern did. The walls rippled. The floor split. The gold vein beside Mateo exploded outward like a vein cut too deep. Not coin. Not metal. Flesh. Mateo screamed as it wrapped around his ankle. Liquid gold hardened instantly. Biting. Binding. Consuming. Elena. She ran. Gripped his arm. Pulled. Javier joined. The gold resisted. Not by force. By remembering him. Mateo screamed as images flooded his skull. A childhood. A first kiss. A stolen car. A broken promise. The gold ate memory. Elena roared. And shoved her hand. Bare. Into the gold. It burned. Screamed. Not with fire. With sorrow. She felt the dead beneath her skin. Felt the mountain's age crush her bones. And then, she whispered. "Stop." Not as command. As grief. Something listened. The gold trembled. Loosened. Mateo ripped free and collapsed, convulsing. Elena fell with him. Javier hauled them back. And the gold retreated like a wounded animal. The cavern quieted. But the mountain watched. Mateo sobbed. Not loud. Not dramatic. Like an engine breaking down forever. "I saw my future," he whispered. Elena held him. "What did it show you?" His voice broke. "Nothing." The door behind the altar opened. Not physically. Spiritually. Like a throat clearing for a scream. Cold wind poured from inside. And with it, rot. Remembered death. Javier stood. "You don't get gold," he said. "You get claimed." Elena raised her eyes. "What is it?" Javier shook his head. "A god that learned language too late." And something stepped forward inside the dark. Not entirely visible. Not entirely shape. But it leaned close enough to whisper. "You dug with greed. You found with blood. And now," it breathed their names together. "You stay?" The mountain learned their fear. And it liked it. Not in a hunger way. In a remembering way. As if something that had been buried not just beneath stone, but beneath centuries of silence, had finally heard its own name spoken aloud again. The air changed. It grew wet. Elena tasted rust on her tongue, like she'd bitten into something with a pulse. The scent that crept through the cavern was not only decay, it was recognition. Like an old house remembering its owner's footsteps. Mateo could no longer move his left foot. Not because it was bound, because it no longer felt like his. Below the knee, sensation had become other. Not numb. Occupied. He slapped his calf. "No," he whispered. Elena crawled to him again, ignoring the gold's gentle pulsing behind her. She peeled his pant leg back and gagged. Gold vein. threading upward into his flesh like a second skeleton being slowly written over his bones. Not wrapped, implanted. Mateo screamed when she touched it, and the sound did not echo. It sank into the stone, into 1,000 whispers. The mountain swallowed everything. Javier turned in fragmented circles, rifle scanning shadows that now moved without light to betray them. Nothing stood still anymore. The cave did not stay the same shape. Sometimes the walls looked too near, sometimes too far. Sometimes they were gone, and the dark beyond them wasn't emptiness but a body. Watching. Elena dashed her sleeve across her mouth. "We need to get out." Mateo laughed. Not hysterically, not wildly, just tired. No edges in it. "We never came in," he said. Elena froze. Javier looked at him sharply. "What do you mean?" Mateo stared at the ceiling, or what their eyes insisted was a ceiling. "I don't remember the walk down." Elena swallowed. "I do." Mateo shook his head. "Then you're lucky." He pressed 2 fingers into the gold infecting his skin. "When this touched me," his voice cracked, "I stopped remembering how my father died." Silence fell thicker than stone. Elena breathed sharply. Mateo looked at her with wet, empty eyes. He didn't disappear in traffic anymore. Her heart seized. Mateo whispered. He just never existed. The gold wasn't stealing their lives. It was erasing their past, rewriting them. A history without suffering. A mountain full of perfect silence. Javier shoved his rifle into its sling and moved to Mateo, gripping his jaw hard enough to force eye contact. "Don't listen to it," he snarled. Mateo smiled softly. "I don't hear it anymore." A sound rippled through the walls. Not growl, not scream. Something between inhale and collapse. Like the mountain was swallowing something alive. Slowly, Elena felt pressure in her skull, like fingers pressing from the inside. Her vision fractured. Not black, gold. Not bright, thick, viscous. Every blink left memories behind. The first face she loved, gone. The last smell she remembered from her childhood, gone. Her hands started trembling. She dug her nails into her own wrist until blood surfaced. The pain anchored her. Barely. The voice returned. Closer. Not thunderous now. Personal. Intimate. It did not speak from the altar anymore. It spoke from inside her. "I can take it away." Her mother's voice. But hollow. Borrowed. "I can unmake the nights you scream into your pillow." Tears fell down Elena's face. Not because she believed it. Because some part of her wanted it. The voice breathed again. "I was not born evil. I was buried afraid." Javier roared. "Shut up." He raised his rifle and fired into the dark doorway. The mountain shrieked. A scream made of ribs and children crying behind walls. The recoil launched him backward. The rifle twisted. Warped. Like metal forced to remember it had once been earth. Javier dropped it with a scream. It moved. Like it had bones now. He stared at his hands. Then at Elena. Blood seeped from his ears. "I remember this place." Elena stiffened. "What? I didn't just come here once." Mateo's eyes flicked toward him. Javier swallowed thickly. "I survived this place." "That wasn't it." Elena waited. Javier whispered what he'd never said out loud. "I helped feed it." The words landed like a body hitting dirt. Mateo laughed again. But this time it came with something liquid in his throat. "You brought us to a god that eats people." Javier nodded. "I told myself it was a cave-in." Elena's voice shook. "You said your unit." He stared at the altar. "No. I said they didn't come back right." The truth cracked open like bone. "I stayed." Elena recoiled. Javier clenched his jaw. "It showed me things." The cavern pulsed. With gold mouths. "I was broken when I arrived." Tears streamed down his face, but he did not wipe them away. "And I left full." Elena whispered. "You gave it someone." Javier nodded. "Every trip." The words bled together. "They sent bodies in bags. I sent men into a mouth." Mateo screamed. Not in fear. In betrayal. "You fed it." Javier broke. "I fed myself." The mountain reacted. Not loudly. The air grew heavier. As if gravity had started remembering old rules. The dark frothed. Something shifted behind the altar again. Closer. So close Elena could feel wet breath on her skin. But there was no face. Only pressure. And the gold. The gold around Mateo reached again. Not violently. Lovingly. As if finishing what it had started. Elena stood. Blinking tears away. Her voice rose. Shaken. Defiant. "You think you're a god?" The cavern leaned in. Listening. She staggered toward the altar. Javier screamed for her to stop. Mateo gasped as gold veins crawled faster. Elena stepped into the wound in the mountain and screamed directly into the dark. "You're not a god." Silence fell. She pointed at the unseen thing. "You're just what happens when pain doesn't die." The mountain recoiled, not in anger, in recognition. Gold flickered. The whispers changed. Not hungrier, sadder. The voice trembled. "I was buried alive." Elena whispered through sobs. "So were you. And you turned your coffin into a throne." The cave shook, not collapsing, convulsing. Mateo's body arched. Gold writhed. Javier stumbled forward, desperate. "Elena." She turned, eyes shimmering with reflection that wasn't gold, but grief. "We can't win, but we can deny it dinner." She threw herself back toward Mateo, grabbing him. The gold burned, screamed. Her flesh bubbled, but she did not let go. Javier joined her. Together they tore Mateo free. The mountain howled, not in rage, in hunger. They ran, not into tunnels, not toward exits. They ran blindly, as if the earth itself tried to forget them. And for the first time since they arrived, the mountain chased. They did not run away from the mountain. They ran into it. The tunnels did not open ahead of them. They rearranged. Stone folded like meat. Passages tightened like throats. The mountain was not attacking. It was closing its mouth. Elena slipped. Her hands struck damp rock that felt soft beneath pressure, and when she pushed up, a thin red imprint remained. Not her blood. Javier hauled her forward without stopping. Mateo dragged behind them, his breaths wet and wrong, each one sounding like it was pulled through water instead of air. The air tasted old, like a library that had burned and been sealed for centuries. Every breath lodged in their lungs and refused to leave. Elena felt it before she saw it. Something was counting her heartbeats. Not measuring, memorizing. She could almost feel fingers numbering her ribs. Her thoughts started misaligning. She would think of childhood and instead see bones organized into patterns. She would think of her name and instead smell rot. Javier screamed when the floor vanished beneath him. He fell, but he did not fall down. He fell backward, through himself. His body struck stone, but his mind splintered somewhere else first. Elena slid to the edge of the sudden drop and held on. Mateo nearly followed before she hooked his jacket. He screamed again, clutching at the gold veining through his leg. The sound echoed wrong, twisted, as if the cavern laughed using his voice. Elena lay flat, gripping both men, staring down into the fracture where Javier had fallen. Javier lay unmoving, his body twisted at an impossible angle. She screamed his name. No response. Mateo started sobbing. "Don't leave me," he whispered. Not to Elena, to the gold. Elena turned sharply. "What?" Mateo clutched his leg. "I can feel it thinking," he cried. It's lonely." Elena slapped his face. Hard. The sound cracked sharp in the tight space. "Listen to me. It wants you quiet. It wants you soft. It wants you small. And it will lie to you until you become all of them." Mateo stared at her. Tears ran sideways across his cheeks. "You don't understand." Elena leaned close. "So make me." Mateo swallowed. His voice thinned. "I'm forgetting my mother." Elena closed her eyes. "And open them with fire. Then remember her wrong if you have to. But don't let something else do it for you." Mateo screamed. Not in pain. In resistance. His fingers dug into his own flesh. Bleeding. Anchoring. Elena grabbed Javier's arm. Pulled. It didn't move. She tried again. And again. And again. Until her muscles screamed louder than Mateo. Javier. His eyes fluttered open. Then bled gold. He convulsed violently. Elena recoiled. Then, his eyes cleared. He gasped. Vomited dark fluid that hissed where it struck the stone. The sound made Elena's stomach twist. She hauled him upright. Javier wheezed. Don't let me." She grabbed his face. "Let you what?" "Stay." They dragged themselves forward again. Tunnels twisted tighter. Lower. Wetter. The ceiling pressed down until they crawled. The gold veins grew thicker. Closer. Elena felt it now. Not just around. Inside. It had touched her long enough to know her shape. She began forgetting things she did not realize were precious until they vanished. Her favorite color. Her favorite word. Mateo's laughter used to sound like bells. Now it sounded wrong. Foreign. Unplaced. Time did not work here. Seconds felt like burial. Minutes like forgetting a face. Hours like rewriting the dead. And then, they reached a room that should not exist. Wide. Still. The walls did not breathe here. The air did not rot. The floor was smooth. Bone smooth. Glass smooth. Too perfect. In the center, a pit. Not dark. Not deep. Just wrong. Elena leaned close. There was no bottom. Not because it was deep. Because there was nothing to fall into. The pit was full of absence. And absence stared back. Mateo whimpered. Javier dropped to one knee. This is where it feeds. Something moved. Not in the pit. Inside, devout silence. Shapes rose from the walls. Gold figures. Not statues. People. Frozen in adoration. Mouths open. Forever asking. Forever thanking. 1,000 faces. 1,000 bargains. Elena recognized one. Her hands began shaking. Mama. She walked forward. Javier grabbed her. No. That thing's mouth copied a smile it had never had alive. The voice emerged. Not loud. Not cruel. Gentle. I don't consume. I keep. Mateo whimpered. No, you don't. Elena took another step. We carry them, it whispered. Inside us. Inside our gold. Inside the mountain's memory. Elena screamed. Then why do they hurt? The voice answered softly. Because I remember every way they died. Mateo collapsed. The gold finished its climb. Up his chest. Across his throat. His mouth opened. Spoke. Not with his voice. But with many. I am not hunger, the mountain whispered through him. I am grief that never ended. Javier raised a broken stone. Elena screamed. No. But Javier wept. And struck. The stone shattered Mateo's skull. The gold screamed from inside him. So did 1,000 others. Elena fell beside Mateo's body. As Javier backed away. Shaking. Bleeding. Broken. He whispered. I didn't want to remember. The mountain trembled. The pit widened. Something inside it opened. Not flesh. Not dark. Truth. And it stared at them. Endlessly. Without eyelids. Without mercy. The mountain screamed without sound. Not with air. With weight. Every atom in the chamber leaned inward, as if existence itself wanted to collapse into the pit and disappear. Elena felt her spine compress. Her teeth vibrated until they ached. The silence roared so loudly it erased thought for seconds at a time. Mateo's body lay twisted on the stone. Except it was not a body anymore. It had begun to melt. Not downward, outward. His flesh peeled open in delicate layers, revealing veins of gold where organs should have been. His ribcage split like a blooming curse, and from within it, something blinked. One eye, then another, then dozens. They opened inside his chest like a cathedral of foreign stars. Javier vomited again. Black. Thick. With bits of gold floating inside like dead sparks. Elena stood frozen as Mateo's mouth moved. Not forming words. Forming mouths. Small ones. Clusters of them. They whispered at once. Stay. Rest. Forget. Give. Let go. Come home. Elena backed away. Her heel struck nothing. She teetered. Then hands grabbed her. Javier pulled her back from the edge. Neither of them dared look behind. The pit had changed. Before, it had been absence. Now it was watching. Not with eyes. With recognition. Javier screamed. His arm twisted suddenly. Not broken. Turned. Wrong direction. As though something inside the pit had gently taken his wrist and tried to remember how humans work. His bones shifted beneath skin. Relearning angles. Forgetting mercy. Elena grabbed his face. Javier. Look at me. Look at me. He whimpered. I can hear them. They're naming everything I've ever done wrong. Elena felt blood in her mouth. Then let them choke on it. The pit began to breathe. In. Out. Slow. Endless. Each breath pulled gold dust from the walls like lungs pulling smoke. Then the mountain spoke. Not aloud. Not in words. Straight into Elena's bones. Not sentences. Confession. History. Regret poured into her until she nearly blacked out. She saw it then. Not myths. Not legends. Memory. The first people did not worship gold. They feared it. It came from the earth already screaming. Mourning. It was found where people vanished. Where bodies rotted wrong. Where grief soaked so deeply into soil that the soil remembered tears. They tried to bury it. Burn it. Starve it. But gold does not die. It waits. It listened. It learned prayers. It learned screams. And then, it learned promises. A man. Centuries ago. Not a king. Not a god. A coward. He found the vein. And he listened. And the gold whispered. I can carry what you cannot. I can keep what you are too weak to bury. So he fed it. lives, children, dreamers. He gave the mountain everything that frightened him about being human. And the gold. Accepted. He walked back as something hollow. No regret. No grief. No fear. And the mountain grew. Not upward. Inward. Until grief itself no longer needed a shape. Until it became place. Until everyone who ever died here did not leave. They stayed. Inside memory. Inside metal. Inside the mountain's long, unfinished sentence. Elena dropped to her knees. Her tears bled gold. Not in color. In weight. She could feel memory soak into her veins. She screamed. Not in pain. In recognition. The mountain had not cursed anyone. People had given it permission. They used it. Until it learned to use them. The pit spoke again. Not in threat. In revelation. I was created to hold what humans escape. And I broke. Elena crawled closer. Her hands burned where they touched the stone. Then let go, she begged. The pit shuddered. I do not know how. Javier laughed. But his eyes wept. That's the most human thing you've said. The pit exhaled. Gold dust spiraled upward. The air thickened. Mateo's body rose. Not as a corpse. Not as a man. But as a mouth. Will. Voice. I will not release what feeds me. The mountain groaned through it. Elena stood. Shaking. Bleeding. Breaking. Then I'll teach you famine. Javier grabbed her arm. Elena, no. But she walked into the pit. There was no fall. No scream. No dark. Only memory. It passed through her. She felt births. Hunger. Love. Suffocation. She felt hands that had never been held. She became a grave and a mother at once. The gold peeled off her thoughts like skin. She did not fight survival. She offered truth. Everything she was. Every pain. Every name. Every loss. She whispered. Here. And the mountain hesitated. For the first time. Because she was not feeding it. She was confronting it. Not with death. With being alive. And the pit cracked. Not open. Aware. Javier screamed her name from far away. Or from never. He smashed the stone into the gold vein at the pit's edge. Again. 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 Until the mountain shook. The gold screamed like a god being unmade. The room tore itself open. Stone fell upward. Air fled. The dead howled. And the mountain finally did the one thing it had never learned. It emptied. Not all. Never all. But enough. Elena lay on cold stone. Bleeding. Still human. Javier sobbed beside her. The pit was smaller. Not gone. Just wounded. And Mateo was dust. Not gold. Not frozen. Just gone. Elena's hand still tingled. Not from pain. From memory. Javier whispered. Did we kill it? Elena shook her head. No. Then she looked into the wounded pit. And understood something worse. We taught it to remember. Dawn did not come. Not here. The mountain did not understand morning. Light, when it seeped through broken stone and fractured roots far above, arrived warped, tired, yellowed, uncertain. It touched nothing directly. It slid across surfaces without warming them, as if afraid of being remembered by this place. Elena opened her eyes into silence. Not peace. Aftershock. The kind of quiet that follows a massacre. Javier was still breathing. That alone felt unnatural. His chest rose shallow and uneven like a wounded animal's. Mateo was gone. Not dead. Not resting. Just erased. No bones. No ash. No echo. The mountain had swallowed even his absence. Elena pushed herself upright and nearly screamed. Her hands were wrong. They were still hers, but faint veins of gold glimmered beneath the skin, as if memory itself had threaded into her blood vessels. When she flexed her fingers, a faint metallic sound whispered inside her knuckles. Not noise, but recognition. The mountain had not released her unmarked. It had touched her history. She tasted copper. She tasted names. Javier stirred. He opened one eye, then the other, then shut them again. Don't tell me the universe survived, he muttered weakly. Elena huffed a laugh that felt like breaking glass. You're still breathing, she replied. The universe probably hates that. Slowly he sat up, then froze. His jaw trembled. He looked at his left arm, where the gold vein had entered him. It was gone. Not healed. Not scarred. Simply wrong. The skin there was ridge-like, textured unnaturally, as though molded from memory instead of flesh. He touched it, and pulled his hand back in terror. I can feel them, he whispered. Elena knew. The mountain had learned, and it had shared. They rose slowly and took stock of what remained. Everything else was ruin. The stone chamber had collapsed inward on itself. Where the pit once yawned, there was now a wound, a shallow crater of fractured glass stone and dying gold that pulsed weakly like a heartbeat, trying to forget it ever learned how. The sanctuary had not survived. Only they had. And something else. The deepest veins still glimmered in the walls. Not as bright, not as alive, but not dead. Waiting. Javier swallowed hard. We can't leave it like this. Elena stared into the glow. We didn't leave it. It left us. Her voice felt older than it should have. Her thoughts didn't flow right anymore. Some memories were suddenly crowded. When she blinked, she sometimes saw hands that were not hers reaching through her eyes. Javier exhaled slowly. We need to get out. Elena nodded. Yes, before it remembers how to call us back. The exit tunnel had shifted. Not sealed. Rewritten. The mountain had taken the cave system and scattered it like thoughts in a dying mind. Corridors folded into one another. Stairs led nowhere. Stone breathed without motion. But Elena knew. She did not just see the path. She felt it. Like remembering a dream she never had. Her feet moved with eerie confidence. Not choice. Recognition. Javier followed her. Every instinct screamed that they should not trust direction coming from a thing that remembered being a god. But they had no map. No signal. No daylight. Only memory. And now, so did she. As they walked, the walls whispered. Low. Muted. Names. Elena's name was among them. Not always, but often enough. They did not taunt. They mourned. Every few steps. She felt it. A tug in her chest. Some fragment of sorrow reaching toward her like a lost child in a war zone. She did not answer. She walked. And the mountain watched her go. They emerged into thin fog and mangled light. The jungle beyond the mountain was wrong. Not dying. Waiting. As if the normal world had paused mid-breath while the mountain resolved itself. Leaves dripped gold-colored sap. Birds cried with unfamiliar voices. Water ran backward over stone before remembering gravity and correcting itself with violent indifference. Javier steadied himself on a tree. Do you see? Elena nodded. Yes. History did not end at the mountain. It leaked, like blood into soil. The jungle had tasted something old, and it would not forget. They walked downhill for hours. Not time. Distance. Eventually, the mountain no longer loomed behind them. But its presence did. A sensation like being followed by grief too vast to fit inside a body. As they reached the edge of a river near dusk, Elena bent and dipped her hands into the water. It trembled, then stilled, then reflected her, and showed someone else behind her. She spun. Nothing. Javier frowned. You're shaking. She nodded. I think. She stopped, then corrected herself. I know it learned my name. Javier exhaled. Then forget yourself. Elena's lips curved in a humorless smile. That's just it. I don't think it ever intends to. That night, they slept with eyes open. The jungle did not rest. Memory rustled in the leaves. Gold glimmered in the mud. The river whispered backwards. And once, just before Elena drifted into nightmare, she heard Mateo's voice. Not calling, not crying. Simply breathing. Right behind her. She did not turn. She did not answer. She only clutched Javier's hand until the dark learned she would not let go. They did not return the same. Not to the jungle. Not to the world. Not to themselves. When they reached the remains of the expedition camp 2 days later, nothing stood exactly where it had been. The tents slumped as if exhausted. The ropes hung loose with forgotten purpose. Supplies lay scattered like the aftermath of a slow, gentle violence. Even their footprints ended halfway to nowhere. Elena stopped moving. Javier noticed. Something wrong. She stared at the ground. No, she whispered. Something followed us. Javier's knuckles whitened. Neither of them turned around. Because they both knew. Nothing was there. That didn't mean nothing was there. The radio did not work. Not broken. Just silent. It hummed. Then coughed. Then whispered. Elena smashed it. Not out of fear. Out of mercy. Because the voice that had tried to come through the static knew her mother's lullaby. Javier looked at her with haunted eyes. It spoke to me too. What did it say? He waited too long to answer. That I left someone alive once. Elena didn't ask who. She didn't need to. The truth didn't need names anymore. They scavenged what they could. Water. Canned food. Matches. Nothing metallic. Elena avoided gold with physical disgust now. The world's oldest lie no longer shimmered. It watched. When they finally left the camp behind and started down towards civilization, the forest grew quieter with every step. Not relief. Offense. Like something offended by being silenced. Mist rolled thick as ash. Voices tried to form in it. Didn't succeed. The jungle had begun to forget how to speak. And that was worse. They reached a village just before night devoured the road entirely. It was not on any map. Not any they had brought. A handful of slanted houses. A chapel with no cross. A well that reflected no moon. The people did not greet them. They only watched. Their eyes were wide. Not with fear. With expectation. The youngest child whispered, "She carries it." Elena froze. The mother backhanded him. Too hard. Too fast. Then they bowed. Not religious. Resigned. Javier whispered, "We shouldn't stay." Elena nodded. But her legs refused. A warm hand touched her back. Old. Gentle. Not human. But not unkind. A woman stood behind her. Wrinkled. Blind. Smiling softly. "You are louder than the others," the woman whispered. Louder with memory. Elena swallowed. "What did I bring?" The woman smiled sadly. "You brought the part of it that wants to be forgiven." Elena closed her eyes. "Tell it to go back." The woman shook her head. "That part of it is already inside you." They were given shelter. Not hospitality. Protection. Elena did not sleep. Not truly. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the pit again. Not as wound. As gate. And it was opening. Inside her. She dreamed of hands clawing upward. Not to escape. To be born again. When she woke screaming, Javier was holding her. Not tight. Desperate. His eyes whispered what his mouth would not. He was changing too. He had begun seeing memories that were not his. Faces. Deaths. Names. The mountain gave generously. It had always loved sharing. In the morning, Elena bled gold. Not from her skin. From her dreams. She woke to find a symbol burned into the dirt beneath her bed. A shape older than language. A mouth swallowing its own heart. The villagers gathered. Silently. The blind woman knelt before her. "You don't belong to yourself anymore." Elena whispered, "I never wanted to belong to anything." The woman smiled gently. "That is why it chose you." As they left the village, Javier finally said what had been eating him. What happens when it finishes remembering? Elena did not answer. She couldn't. Because she knew. She just wasn't ready to make it real. The mountain was not coming. It was growing. Inside her. Inside Javier. Inside the people they passed. Inside the land itself. Gold did not worship. It waited. And now, it walked. There was no road back. Not because the forest closed. Not because the world ended. But because neither of them belonged on the side of things that kept going anymore. By the third day beyond the village, Elena stopped casting a shadow. Not always. Not completely. Just inconsistently. Sometimes the sun touched her and forgot. Javier noticed when her boots left no prints in wet clay. He said nothing. Because if he acknowledged it, it might become true. And some truths were more dangerous once named. The jungle thinned. Fields appeared. Fences cracked by heat and neglect. Civilization returned in pieces, like a memory someone tried to reconstruct while drunk and grieving. The first town they reached was awake, but acting like it wasn't. Shops open, lights on, people moving, but no voices, only eyes. And all of them followed Elena. A boy dropped a sack of rice the moment she passed. A woman crossed herself violently. A man locked his door from the inside as she walked by. Javier's hands curled into fists. What do they see? Elena whispered. Everything they've ever buried. A bell rang from somewhere. Once. Then again. Then not from the church. From people's chests. Invisible chimes of old sins awakening at once. They did not speak her name. They didn't need to. She had become a memory the world tried to forget and failed. The government station at the edge of town still had power. Barely. Static Eden radios. Yellowed maps. The officer behind the desk did not ask for ID. He stared at Elena until tears ran sideways down his face like he had forgotten how gravity worked. Then he whispered, I dreamed about you when I was 9. Elena closed her eyes. What happened in the dream? You stood in my kitchen, and my father apologized in a language I didn't know. Then he disappeared. Elena swallowed. What did I say? The man wiped his eyes. You told me memory is heavier than death. And then my house turned to dust. She took a step back. She had never been there, never spoken to him. Yet his grief had waited its entire life for her to return. Javier's voice was low. We're not staying. The man nodded desperately. You shouldn't. It's already moving. Elena's breath caught. What is? The man looked at the ceiling. Forgiveness. They drove north in an old pickup stolen from a man who said nothing and handed over the keys with relief instead of fear. The farther from the mountain they went, the stronger Elena became. Not power. Presence. Like grief learning how to walk upright. Like history cracking its knuckles. She could feel people before she saw them. Not bodies. Burden. Every town tasted of unresolved mourning. Every field smelled of dead ambition. Memory followed her like footprints behind a living thing. One night, Javier collapsed. Convulsed. Foamed. Screamed names that were not human. And then whispered, "Don't let me keep them." Elena held him. The gold veins in her arms pulsed faintly. He clawed at her sleeves. "I can hear them lining up inside me." She whispered back, "They're not lining up. They're kneeling." Javier laughed weakly. "Then I'm a temple now?" Elena kissed his forehead with lips that tasted like metal. "No, you're an altar." The dreams began to bleed into daylight. Elena saw reflections standing behind people. Not shadows. Remorse. Children played with bones without knowing they were bones. Old women whispered apologies to empty chairs. And the earth. The earth slowly remembered that it was a grave. Entire towns began to stop sleeping. Not from fear. From recognition. They felt their buried truths stirring underground. And Elena was the heartbeat. The impossible center. The scar walking upright. They reached the city at dusk. A skyline lit like a funeral pyre. Billboards burned. Antennas bent like crosses. People screamed inside their own apartments and did not know why. When Elena stepped onto concrete, the ground remembered rainforest. Roots cracked asphalt. Gold veins split highways. The city trembled like a body having second thoughts about existing. Javier fell to his knees. He wept openly. "I thought it would end when we left it." Elena bent toward him. Her face no longer fully human. Not monstrous. Just older. "Nothing ends," she replied softly. "It only changes names." Then the voice returned. Not the mountain. Not the pit. Not Mateo. Something deeper. Something after grief. No one forgives what outlives them. Elena looked up. The sky had an eye now. Not literal. Not symbolic. Knowing. And it was tired. She whispered, "Then why do I carry you?" The voice answered, "Because someone finally chose not to run." Javier screamed as the gold inside him burned. Not fire. Clarity. Every lie bled out through his eyes. Elena held him. Not as a lover. Not as a friend. As an ending. He whispered, "I'm full." She whispered, "Then let go." And he did. Not dying. Not living. He exhaled memory. And the city inhaled. Elena rose alone. The skyline bent toward her. The world leaned. Waiting. She did not command. She did not beg. She stood. And history shuddered. Not because it feared her. Because it finally had something to answer to. Morning arrived wrong. Not darker. Not red. Not loud. It came pale. Too pale. Like the world had been drained overnight and refilled with something thinner. Elena stood in the cracked center of the city while people peered from behind curtains and door frames like animals waiting for a storm that had memorized their names. No one touched her. No one could. It felt like entering the space around a funeral before the coffin arrives. The city did not breathe. It listened. Elena felt it now. Not as power. Not as fear. As weight. Every grief she had awakened across villages, valleys, and generations pressed inward on her bones. She knelt, but the ground did not accept her. It repelled her knees like she was a wrong answer. "Still here," she whispered. And the world answered by staying quiet. Javier's absence was louder than thunder. She felt him everywhere. In flickering traffic lights. In wind tunneling through alleys. In the ache behind her eyes. He was not dead. He was distributed. Broken across the city into pieces thin as prayer. She could sense children suddenly forgiving fathers they would never see again. Mothers letting go of names they had screamed into pillows for decades. Old men remembering crimes they had buried beneath successful lives. The city wept. Not outward. Inward. Like roofs learning what rain once felt like. The mountain returned to her in memory. Not stone. Not gold. Its voice. Quieter. Smaller. Barely more than breath. "You gave them back to themselves." Elena whispered. "They didn't ask for remembrance." The mountain answered. "No one asks for truth. They ask for sleep. You woke them anyway." She swallowed. "Then why am I still here?" for the part that doesn't belong to you. People came closer now. Slowly. Not a mob. A procession. Bare feet. Bandages. Eyes too open. They did not chant. They did not demand. They simply gathered the way families gather around a hospital bed when the machines begin to lie. An old woman stepped forward. She held a photograph that time had tried to erase. A girl in braids. 10 years old. A throat cut in memory. The woman knelt. Not to Elena. To the earth. And whispered, "I remember." Then she faded. Not vanished. Relieved. One by one. Others followed. Confessions spoken to air. Regrets given to silence. Some collapsed. Some smiled. Some dissolved like breath on glass. Not death. Release. Elena could feel herself thinning with them. Like wax near flame. Like memory finally allowed to sleep. Her body began to fail in quiet ways. Her heartbeat skipped sounds. Her veins no longer carried blood alone. Gold faintly traced her skin like a map to somewhere she could never go. Her bones felt ancient. Hollowed by names. By faces. By storms without rain. The voice inside her whispered, "You were never going to survive what you carried." Elena smiled sadly. "I wasn't supposed to." A child approached. No ghosts in her eyes. No grief in her mouth. Just ordinary dirt on her knees. Sun in her hair. The girl took Elena's hand. She did not burn. She did not flinch. She did not cry. "What's your name?" the child asked. Elena paused. The question landed heavier than the gold ever had. Names were anchors. Names were gravity. Names were promises. She had been none of those. "I don't think I have one anymore," Elena said. The girl frowned. "Then you can borrow mine. I have two." And she laughed. Elena felt something inside her break open. Not bone. Not soul. Hope. Uninvited. Unreasonable. Alive. The sky cracked soundlessly. Not a storm. Not a sign. Just permission. The world exhaled. The city's weight lifted a fraction. Enough for birds to remember flying. Enough for trees to press forgotten roots back into streets like slow, stubborn apologies. Elena's feet began to turn to dust. Not ash. Not light. Earth. Real earth. The girl squeezed her hand tightly. "Are you going away?" Elena knelt so they were eye to eye. "No," she whispered. "I'm staying everywhere." The child smiled like it was the easiest thing in the world to understand. Okay. Then Elena was not knees. Not hands. Not breath. She was warmth under sun. Cold under moon. A softness in dirt that seeds trust again. She became places. And all her edges disappeared. In time, the city forgot her face. That was the mercy. Stories remained. Not of horror. Of endings. Of apologies that woke people from sleep without permission. Of a woman-shaped silence that once walked among buildings and taught grief where to go when it grew tired of being a weapon. No statue was ever built. No church. No monument. Just weather. Gentler, sometimes. Just soil. Richer, sometimes. Just dreams. Clearer, sometimes. Far away. In a village that remembered thirst too well. A child dug in mud after the first rain in years. Her hands found something warm underground. Not gold. Not bones. A small, smooth stone that pulsed once. And then went still. The girl put it in her pocket like a secret. Like a promise. And the rain kept falling. Not miracles. Not punishment. Just water. Finally. Enough. Epilogue. Some stories are not told to be remembered. They are told to be finished. And somewhere in the Andes. The mountain is quiet now. Not asleep. Not dead. Just unburdened.